I don't normally think of myself as being an easy mark for things, but looking back on my history with certain games, I start to see patterns. I like cyberpunk stories that have that distinctly 80s neon chrome look. I like stories that take place inside of computers. I like that geometric pastel Lisa Frank 90s thing. I like non-violent exploratory gameplay. I like janky, weird, glitchy indie games that maybe don't quite work right, but there is value in them anyways. And today's game kind of has all of that. So I have to confess that I am a soft mark for this sort of thing, and you may have to take most of what I say today with a large grain of salt. Anyways, today's game is Broken Reality, a first-person exploration game about living inside of a 3D version of the internet called Natum. Natum is part metaphor for the relationship of its creators, part all-encompassing virtual space, but more than anything it's a 90s-style VRML chat room. However, you won't find its denizens particularly interested in chatting, whether it's premier users relaxing on an imaginary luxury cruise, or newly created accounts mulling around the opening island's tropical gazebos. You'll find people in Natum largely ignore you and are concerned exclusively with their own problems. That's because in Natum the only true currency is the number of likes you have. The more popular one is, the more powerful one is, and you play as an unnamed protagonist looking to conquer this particular social space by becoming the most popular user possible. To do so, you have to collect likes, a numeric manifestation of your popularity and worth on the internet. Sometimes they're just scattered around the environment like coins in Mario. This has the added benefits of tracking which areas you have and haven't visited, providing rewards for exploration, and occasionally allowing for breadcrumb trails to secrets. Sometimes you get likes as rewards for completing quests like experience in an RPG. You can grind for likes by exploration, but really the easiest way to make sure you're ready to move on to the next area is to complete the central quests. And sometimes you get them through optional side activities like a photography minigame, or by shopping effectively at the various stores in Natum. All of these likes slowly unlock more and more of the system to you as you complete your goal to find the most exclusive chat rooms. Along the way, you find out a little bit more about the history of Natum and its creators, and maybe a little bit about what your role in all of this is. From a gameplay perspective, Broken Reality is kind of an exploration-based Metroidvania title. Well, the first island of the game absolutely is a Metroidvania. It's where you collect all the tools you'll be using for the rest of the game, and to get them you're guided to unlock areas by getting a new tool that grants you access to other areas to get another tool that unlocks access to additional areas, and so on. These tools include a liker that lets you like ads and interact with things, a bookmark tool that lets you teleport to a previous location instantaneously, a hyperlink tool that functions like a hookshot on specific panels, a magical katana that lets you cut through malware, a credit card that allows you to make purchases and pull money out of ATMs, and a digital camera. Once you've collected these items and finished the first world, though, the unlocks and upgrades slow down a little bit, and the game really becomes more about using those set tools to solve puzzles while exploring a variety of weird, wacky scenarios and all the characters that inhabit them, while trying to farm enough likes to become the most popular user. As you can tell from the footage, the game leans hard into a sort of retro 90s look. But it's not tied to any specific 90s technology per se. There are bits designed to look like any given frame was generated on a C64 machine, and there are lo-fi areas that look closer to an N64 title. The result is sort of a hodgepodge techno look that underscores the game's goofy sensibilities. Everything is in service to a game that constantly tries to crack jokes and make irreverent references or present absurd situations, like getting tea for a samurai master who wants to forge you the sword what can kill viruses, or literally committing the crime of downloading a car in the game's big city area. It's all very much tongue-in-cheek, but all the humor belies a sense that there's something darker going on just outside of view. And that's kind of the back-of-the-box summary for Broken Reality, a non-violent comedy exploration game that's pretty long as far as exploration-based games go, and has some enjoyable puzzles to solve with the limited abilities it gives you. So, let's talk theme. You may have noticed that the game has a familiar-ish aesthetic. And to understand Broken Reality, you kind of have to understand the whole scene surrounding it, so... Talking about this poses a bit of a challenge for me because I am not a music critic, or even much of a music guy in general, and I definitely wasn't involved in any of the internet subcultures that birthed Vaporwave, so I'm a little out of my wheelhouse here. That said, I'm going to try to cite some sources below that I've done my reading on, and acknowledge to any scene aficionados or hardcore genre buffs that I am speaking in way overly broad strokes, and that I mean no offense. This is an overview from 10,000 feet that I need to be able to talk about a video game that walks in the same aesthetic circles, not a comprehensive history of an internet music genre. With that out of the way, Vaporwave originated as a musical subgenre on the internet in the early 2010s, with two works generally being cited as progenitors. Chuck Person's Echo Jams Volume 1 was an album that took 80s pop hits and slowed them down, added reverb, and chopped them up to create new songs that had sort of a haunting, somber quality about them. Meanwhile, James Ferraro's Farside Virtual took archaic operating system alerts, sounds from popular computer applications, and early text-to-speech samples, and applied them to chipper, jazzy tunes. Farside Virtual seemed to call back to the "Where do you want to go today?" and "Think different" eras of blue sky computational optimism. These two proto-Vaporwave albums led to the creation of Macintosh Plus's Floral Shop, an album that merged Farside Virtual's use of kitschy corporate ephemera and veneer of optimism with Echo Jam's disquieting tone and tendency towards pitch-down, reverb-heavy samples from other sources, resulting in something that felt decidedly more critical of its source material and of its own superficial hopefulness. From Floral Shop, the genre exploded out into a bunch of different directions, but two overriding themes started here that seem to hang over most Vaporwave albums. One, there's an impish irony at play within the genre, which I guess you'd expect from a concept that originated on the internet. Echo Jams Volume 1's author, Daniel Lopatin, has stated he did the album as a bit of a joke, but joke or not, it helped spark an entire artistic movement. And the genre as a whole, at least in broad strokes and as a gross generalization, tends to have a playful attitude with the way it treats its relationship with its samples and aesthetic trappings, and whether Vaporwave is an artistic movement or just a pile of memes, and even whether it's alive or dead at this point. It is at once serious and worthy of academic study, and a big old pile of in-jokes and piss-taking, and it never wants you to know which it is at any given time. Does Vaporwave evoke Japanese exoticism because it's interested in referencing cyberpunk dystopias as an intentional commentary on its corporate samples, or is the genre's use of Japanese language and iconography more of an indulgent weeaboo move that invokes the 80s fear of corporate takeovers from the Far East because it's late 80s tech and this is more late 80s, early 90s-y? Is the retro tech aesthetic embraced because it emphasizes the inevitability of technological obsolescence, or because it genuinely finds old school computer samples really cool sounding and worth exploring? Is its hazy, dreamlike sensibility an attempt to tap into some underlying anxiety or disillusionment with reality, or is it just an unintended side effect of the audio distortions that became a hallmark of the genre? Music critic Adam Harper pointed out this duality between joke and statement, between criticism and embrace, in his 2012 piece Vaporwave and the Pop Art of the Virtual Plaza. Quoting Harper, "Is it a critique of capitalism or a capitulation to it? Both and neither." These musicians can be read as sarcastic anti-capitalists, revealing the lies and slippages of modern technoculture and its representations, or as its willing facilitators, shivering with delight upon each new wave and delicious sound. We could apply to their music a term used to describe a certain sentiment and praxis that has recently gained currency among philosophers of capitalism. Accelerationism. Accelerationism is the notion that the dissolution of civilization wrought by capitalism should not and cannot be resisted, but rather must be pushed faster and farther towards the insanity and anarchically fluid violence that is its ultimate conclusion, either because this is liberating, because it causes a revolution, or because destruction is the only logical answer. Which brings up the second theme that most, though by no means all, of Vaporwave ends up engaging with, intentionally or not. Vaporwave is inexorably tied to a discussion of, if not capitalism as an economic system, then the detritus and forgotten artifacts that capitalism leaves in its wake. It is, after all, founded on remixing synthy corporate advertising samples, soothing elevator music, the sort of harmless, easy-listening jazz you'd hear in a mall, and super consumable pop tunes, and turning them all into a low-tempo, dreamlike soundscape that is at once optimistic, but dreamy and depressing and full of dread. Combined with its inescapable joking irony, the result is music that can at once be read as a celebration and lament of the waste generated as a byproduct of corporate machinations. Art created and then discarded, given new life, even if that new life singularly reflects on its own abandonment. An ode to planned obsolescence as sung by the obsolete. It's the whole reason that YouTuber Dan Bell has teamed up with a variety of Vaporwave artists for his Dead Mall series on YouTube. Bell has been documenting dying in dead malls for a few years now, and each one he visits gets a video documentary augmented by a soundtrack by various Vaporwave artists. To put it in his own words,
Vaporwave is more than an art form, it's like a movement. It's nihilistic, it's angsty, but it's somehow comforting. The whole aesthetic is a way of dealing with things you can't do anything about, like no jobs, or sitting in your parents' basement eating ramen noodles. Vaporwave came out of this generation's desire to express their hopelessness, the same way that the pre-internet generation did sitting around in the food court.
Which brings us back to Broken Reality. Broken Reality is clearly influenced by the Vaporwave movement. It's got the music that ranges from chillwave to outright Vaporwave. It's got the pastel colors, the simple geometric shapes, and obsession with fetishizing/exoticizing Japanese culture that are the hallmarks of Vaporwave album covers. Heck, Floral Shop gets a call out as the highest level of performance you can get in the shopping minigame, along with some other more secret references to it that I don't want to spoil here. But all of this is surface level stuff. Why does Broken Reality take the Vaporwave aesthetic and run with it, and what does it do with it? Well, it takes the genre's love of corporate and technological ephemera and turns it into the game world itself. Natum is built on archaic cyber kitsch, from chunky processors and fans to pop-up ads to pixely cursors, and despite still having a sizable-ish user base for what it is, Natum has largely decayed from whatever heyday it may have had. Its ruins may allow for some light exploration-based puzzle solving from a gameplay perspective, but they also are ruins because the system has been abandoned by its creators. Graphical glitches riddle Natum, viruses are everywhere. The entirety of the remaining community is, in a beautiful visual metaphor, more interested in spending time on their phones than existing in this virtual place. If Vaporwave at once laments and celebrates advertising jingles and music, Broken Reality laments and celebrates the broken and dying corners of the internet. The half-functional web rings from 1995, corrupted VRML chat rooms, and zombie computers joining botnets out of a long-neglected closet in a derelict office. Heck, the major metropolitan area in Broken Reality is called GeoCity. What Dan Bell tries to do for decaying malls, Broken Reality tries to do for crumbling software by using the same aesthetic language. It is a walking tour of a dying space. That space just happens to be digital. But it also feels like Broken Reality tries to marry its commentary on social networks to the economic anxieties inherent to Vaporwave. One of the key tools the game gives you is a credit card, but money itself doesn't mean anything in the game. It's really not much of a resource. It's all about image. The more money you spend in Natum, the more popular you are. You get likes for using ATM machines or by being an effective, trendy shopper. This is where likes being treated like coins in Mario becomes a semi-relevant metaphor. Money can lead to popularity, but popularity itself is the currency. But what does that currency buy in a dying, broken system? If Adam Harper is right, and Vaporwave does hold an accelerationist view of capitalism, Broken Reality seems to suggest an accelerationist view of social media, and technology in general. But unlike accelerationism in response to capitalism, which hypothesizes some endpoint for capitalism itself that we need to rush to, Broken Reality seems to think that technological breakdowns are cyclical. Numerous characters reference rebirth or seem to have an iterative existence, like Zero-chan and Oni-chan. But this is perhaps highlighted best by the mural before heading into the Aquanet. There is a series of pictures that tell the tale of a community torn apart by two different media standards, leading to its ruin. Then, putting aside their differences, they come together to rebuild, only to find a new format to fight over. Broken Reality seems to long for a post-Facebook, post-Twitter world, but knows that whatever is on the other side will just restart the same process that produced landfills full of zip disks and hard drives full of forgotten GeoCities sites. The platform wars never end. It's a fitting stance for a game whose Kickstarter demo is still on itch.io, but whose full game is, as of this recording, still only on Steam. If Broken Reality trips up, it's in the game's jokes. They are tonally all over the place. Sometimes they're wacky and adorable, like when the cruise ship captain wants to talk privately with you. Other times they're a bit more stock stoner humor. For example, a character named Chronic the Hedgehog makes repeated appearances, and that's the joke. It's a Sonic that does pot and is green and has a Rasta hat. Then, every once in a while, it goes full-on adult joke. Like, one secret area reveals a peephole into another room with two robot people having oral sex. Huh? In GeoCity, one of the advertisements is for Lollipop, which... yeah... There's also a restaurant filled with a mariachi skeleton band and operated by alien greys called Trace Aliens, which at first feels like it could kind of be obliquely racist until you remember that the game's developer, Dynamic Media Triad, is a Mexican development studio. So it's an ironically race-tinted joke. In fairness, very few of these gags are like in your face or detract from the experience overwhelmingly, but they give the game a background radiation of Schrodinger's edgelord humor. Is it being mean-spirited, or is it ironic and referential? Is it invoking memes because it's aesthetic, or because it wants to say something with them? It's a form of irony poisoning that makes one sense that there's nothing truly earnest in the game, from the tragic falling out of Natum's creators, which is the secret background lore of most of what happens in the game, to its love of Vaporwave. And honestly, that ambiguity between is this a joke or is this a meaningful statement might be one of the most Vaporwave things about Broken Reality. While there's a ton of things that could be said about what it's trying to do artistically, meaningful critique becomes difficult when everything about the game can either be responded to with, it's just a joke, or it's just joking about being just a joke and is actually really deep. And all of that makes processing my feelings on Broken Reality difficult, because every time I feel like I'm picking away at Natum's mysterious backstory and its creator's big dispute, or drawing meaningful parallels to an artistic movement, or trying to parse the game's trippy final moments and finding something potentially meaningful or resonant, I remember the flamboyant administrator that calls me baby.
Watch out, bro. Watch out, bro.
Or the inner city gangster types that litter GeoCity, and realize it's kind of intentionally a joke, or at least as much of a joke as you want it to be. Because there's no earnestness, because it's so dedicated to its own aesthetic trappings above everything else, one doesn't get a sense of what Broken Reality actually values. Compare this to, say, Secret Little Haven, which is also a Vaporwave-influenced title. It's earnest almost to a fault, but it's never ambiguous about what it really feels or what it takes seriously. Even Broken Reality's game design has a sort of duality to it. It's a non-violent exploration game, which traditionally means a design that's friendly to new players, that involves a lot of walking around as you consume environmental narratives. But here there are some seriously non-trivial puzzles that ask you to do tightly timed hookshot chains or navigate an abstract 3D environment like a pro. Like I said at the outset, I have a soft spot for almost everything this game is trying to do, so I can't say I didn't enjoy my time with it, even if I ran into a few game-breaking bugs during my playthroughs. But putting aside how much the game resonated with me personally, it's clear that Broken Reality is, above all, an aesthetic experience, not about narrative or theme or even so much about tone as it is about capturing this particular look and sound, about capturing the artistic sensibilities of the moment, even if the moment it's capturing peaked in 2012. In a very real sense, Broken Reality is Vaporwave the video game, for good and for ill. And that probably sounds like it could be really cool, or really exhausting, depending on your views of the subject. If you dig the overall visual design and can look past the problematic memery, there's some interesting ideas at play here about the intersection of technology, culture, and capitalism. But if peeling back layer after layer of irony only to realize there's nothing really concrete at the core doesn't sound appealing, or if an edgy nihilist streak that embraces aesthetics over values turns you off, maybe avoid this one. Like the Vaporwave albums that inspired it, Broken Reality is both a self-referential joke no one is meant to take seriously, and an attempt to wrestle with some very real modern anxieties.